And welcome back to the Golf Intervention Podcast. It's a big day. It's Rob Phil's birthday. And he's recording an episode. He's giving you, the listener, a gift for his birthday, which is recording an episode on approach shot strategy.
That's right.
Can you imagine a more generous person? Happy birthday, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, my gift is being able to talk to you on this fine evening. So
we talked about in the last episode that really the celebration of your 30th birthday was a trip
that was
to,
playing Cypress
Monterey.
Point and Monterey Peninsula Country Club and all that.
So awesome. Who designed Monterey Peninsula Country Club? Who was the architect there?
That's a great question, but I know it's one of the only facilities in the country that have 2 top 100 courses.
Private facilities.
Which is pretty insane.
That's insane.
Private facilities, yep.
Yeah, that's insane. So anyway, did you do anything fun for your birthday? Did you go to work today? Were you off today?
Yeah, played a little bit of golf. I was off,
Nice.
But I still played a little bit of golf, yeah.
We finally have good weather in Virginia. It's been a stretch. Nothing to complain about, obviously, but
It's been awful.
But today was a sunny, cool, low humidity fall day in Virginia. I'm glad you got to play some golf on your birthday. And I'll bet you had some approach shot strategy going on out there. That's what we're going to discuss today. And if you go back and listen 2 episodes ago, we went through the framework of tee shot strategy. And that's a good one. So you might want to check that one out first. That one probably frames out a little bit more than we'll go in depth with today. But this episode could be 3 hours long. It's not going to be. It could be, though. There's a lot to this. And what I was really thinking about today is I want the listener to know that, yes, there is approach shot strategy. Okay. And we're going to go through it today. There's a lot to it. And then B, approach shot strategy is not one of these 2 things, which is aim at the flag and hope your ball goes dead straight. And again, as I've talked about this on the podcast before, I think every golfer kind of starts there for the most part. Just, hey, there's the flag. This is where I am. I'm trying to hit it there. It is not that. At least it shouldn't be that. Secondly, it is not aim for the middle. Aim for the middle of every green is not it either. And we'll kind of discuss that a little bit. So I wanted to frame the episode out as I think we can start with these 2 things and then go from there. So the fact that, as a golfer who's learning to play the game, we have such a difficult time learning to control the ball to start with, right? We're just swinging and hitting. We know just making good contact is a struggle. We're trying to work through that. That's we've said that over and over again. Your level 1 player is like just learning to hit the ball better. And so the result is very inconsistent with ball flights, right? Like I can make the same intention swing and hit it left, hit it straight, hit it right, hit it short, hit it long, hit it low, hit it high, because I'm just inconsistent. I'm learning the game. And so it doesn't play in a ton like, oh, I should, aim here because I'm going to see this type of thing. Like we're just not that consistent, right? So as you develop into a better player, you're going to start to find that there's some strategy to where you do want the ball to go and where you don't want the ball to go. And I think we all end up having that epiphany, like, okay, aiming straight at the flag all the time is not the best answer, right? Because I have some ball flight now that's kind of consistent. What is it? For most golfers, it's missing, right-handed golfers, it's missing right. And so if there's a pond on the right of the green or a hazard or out of bounds, we start aiming a little bit more to the left. And this is sort of the foundation of what our strategy becomes. On this episode today, we're going to take you through a bigger picture as far as the framework of what it takes to play a shot, have a shot in golf, and control it and predict it in a way that's going to bend the probability into your favor. So do you remember having sort of any epiphany as a player, Rob, at some point where you were like, okay, as a player, for you, this was probably in high school at some point. Like, I've got to determine somehow where the ball should go and where it shouldn't go, but yet I'm still trying to figure out where exactly it's going. Anyway, so
Yeah.
do you remember having those moments like as a kid? Probably don't remember the exact day, but do you remember like starting to play with a little bit more strategy as a junior golfer?
It never consciously came into my awareness when I was a kid or playing junior golf. I think what I started to do is self-organize, essentially kind of like steering the ball to where it probably should go, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would consciously aim at the flag and then learn to, push it and pull it towards the fat side, right? And that's my brain self-organizing, like, hey, you don't have a complete control over where this golf ball goes, but my consciousness, like my very kind of my decision making brain is saying like, no, like hit at the flag. But then on a much deeper level, you've had enough history, enough memories of hitting actually a pretty darn good shot that goes just a little bit left of your intention that ends up in the water or in a penalty area, to know like, hey, it's okay. If I miss a little bit right here, I'll be able to putt. If I miss a foot left, I'm in in the I'm in the stuff. So you start to learn, I think, as a kid, then maybe some not optimal habits, I think, to try to get your dispersion closer to where it needs to be. But the first time I was really exposed to this was when Jason Sutton brought Scott Fawcett over to Carmel Country Club, and he did a presentation for us. And I just remember afterwards, just my head exploding, because that was the first time I'd ever seen anything from Mark Brody's strokes gained information. That was the first time that I ever thought about aiming your dispersion. That was a huge moment for me, because it got me down this road of thinking differently. So really grateful for that experience for sure.
No question. I think I told the story on the podcast before, but when I think I heard Scott Fawcett's first interview on Sirius XM radio back when it was just like playinglessons.com or whatever, and I literally pulled my car off the road so I could write
Yeah.
down like his website information. Like I'm like, whatever this guy is saying is like game
Yeah.
changing for me. And so we're going to go into why that is, and then probably a little bit more of our own spin on how we teach that. Um, and so that kind of takes us through like don't aim at the flag all the time. But then the other answer is don't aim at the middle of the green all the time either.
Right.
That's like your basic. Oh, you should just aim at the middle of the green. Pretend there's no flag and aim at the middle of the green all the time, and you'll be a better player. And I think there is some wise old truths to that in a way. It gets us, I guess, away from the mindset of just aiming at the flag all the time. However, we were talking just right before we came on. I said, how many holes did you play today, Robbie, where if you'd have just aimed at the middle of the green, that could have been a disastrous result for you. I mean, so
Yeah.
aiming at the middle of the green isn't the right answer either, because depending on all the variables we're going to talk about today, that could, inside your sort of expected dispersion pattern of your shots, actually put you in trouble. It could put you in more trouble than maybe even aiming off the green one side or another, or aiming at the flag wherever it was on that hole at that moment, that day, depending on
Yeah.
slope, wind, length, control, skill, length, all the stuff that matters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
And
a
I think
that's a
it's
big one, I think, to kind of settle in on it. That is not strategy either. And so
correct.
how about today? Did you see a few shots like that?
Yeah, no, and I think just to piggyback off your last point there, I think just defining some terms before we get going, I think would be a good idea. So starting off with basically dispersion would be um, something that we've talked about in the podcast before, but essentially the overall shot pattern of say you hit 100 golf shots, right? They're going to end up in this sort of shotgun blast, and there's going to be a distance dispersion, long to short, as well as a direction dispersion, right to left, right? So we want to be aiming the center of this pattern, understanding the characteristics of the pattern, meaning how long is it right to left, how long is it long to short. And then now when we go from dispersion and center of dispersion, which you can use as being your target, right? We might say the word target a few times. We're going to talk about that in the light of the center of dispersion. Then you have your aim, which is your intended start direction relative to that target. And then you have your alignment, right? Which is where your body or your club face or anything might point prior to swinging the golf club. And it's okay if you're not aligned to your aim. And if your aim isn't aligned to your target, that's okay. They can be three separate things to try to accomplish that overall goal of getting the center of your dispersion where you want.
So we've gone through this on different episodes, right? This is not a new thing that we were discussing. Today we're going to discuss it, I think, just a little like we like to do. We like to put it out there, and then we try to pull a thread or two and go a little bit deeper. And so that's what we did on tee shots, right? We did that on tee shot strategy and kind of went through all the stuff that we're trying to do there, all the things that we're trying to accomplish. So if you didn't listen to that episode, again, go back 2 episodes and check that out. And one of the big things that we try to do on this show, for sure, when we can, is to make specific recommendations for different levels of player based on data. Yep. This is not based on us. I mean, a little bit of observation of tens of thousands of hours teaching golf, but also the data. The data plays out in a certain way that we've looked at and said, okay, if you're someone who's beginning golf all the way to basically being just above a bogey golfer, we call you a level 1 player, and you're going to have certain things you're thinking about. And then the intermediate golfer, which is probably most people listening to this, somewhere between 20 handicap-ish. I don't know. We don't really use handicaps, but scoring average 90, something like that. Down to scratch golfer, which is about scoring average 76, roughly. That intermediate is a big group of golfers. And so we call them level 2. And then if you're, a scratcher better, you're level 3. And when it comes to this, level 4 is tour player, but tour player really, their decision-making isn't that different, right? In this sense, right? They're just better at it,
right.
But their decision-making is going to be the same. They have the same considerations. So that's kind of the cool part about it. And so I think maybe we start off with do you want to start with the general framework and then work through level 1, 2, and 3? I think we did that on the tee shots, but it's been so long. It's been a month. I haven't listened to it. It's all good.
Yeah. So the overall general framework would be kind of like your score intent, shot, skill, swing, and the score value of the shot is more like the outcome stuff that we would like to have happen but don't directly control. But that's really going to influence then and create a roadmap for our processes for the shot that we're trying to play. So it goes score, shot. Most everything we're talking about in this episode is what are our score value considerations, and then what are our shot processes that are going to then align to that. This isn't going to be a skill development episode. This is not going to be a swing episode. This is more about like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is your shot process to then start to create that outcome you want more often, right? Mm-hmm. And so within that shot process, we have really your intention, right? So your target, and then your prediction, right? How is the wind, the lie, the slope going to adjust, right? Your distance and direction, intention for the shot, right? And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty much it, right? Then from there, you're just picking a club, aim, align, swing, right? Now, again, in this context, we're going to talk about aim and alignment as two different things. Again, aim is your intended start direction. Alignment would then be very kind of specific to the golfer. Everyone's different, right? We can't tell you where to align or where to, in some cases, maybe even where to aim if we don't know the golfer in front of us specifically. But we can make some generalizations in how these different environmental factors are going to change where maybe a golfer needs to move their intended aim. But that is not the same as target, right? Target or intention, right? You can think of it as, where you actually want the golf ball to go is very much rooted in math, is very much rooted in the data that we've learned from strokes from Mark Brody, from GameForge, people like this, to try to optimize our strategy throughout a round of golf.
So let's give a general picture of it, of like a
Yep.
What would a hole location,
Yeah, like
green setup, 150-yard shot. Give me a visual on somebody's just their expected dispersion pattern. Call it a 15 handicap. What we'll make it up, obviously, for this person.
Yeah, so we're going to start with basically what your expected dispersion might be from a distance and from a direction standpoint. They are going to be different because very, very rare, if ever, is our dispersion a perfect circle, right? So you're going to have oftentimes for our level 1 and 2 players, probably a little bit more long to short dispersion. And then probably level 2 is where it gets kind of almost circular with the right to left. And then once you get to level 3, the long to short gets proportionally tighter than the right to left. Right. So when you look at a green, that is going to play into that, right? Is how much depth of the green do you have long to short? How much width do you have on the green right to left? Where is the penalty area long to short? Right? Short of the green, beyond the green. Where's the penalty area left to right? Right. And then you have where the hole location is. So you have these three main things that you're taking into account, right? Where's the penalty area? Right. And then we can talk about for level 1, level 2, level 3, how you might include maybe bunkers into that. What's the dimensions of the green? And then where's the hole? Those are kind of your big 3 that you're looking at: penalty area, green, hole location. And then for your dispersion, right? What's the size of your dispersion and what's the shape of your dispersion relative to that green? So you're starting to see you have these 2 different shapes. You have the shape of your dispersion, and then you have the shape of the approach shot area, right? Where the green, where penalty areas are, and where the hole is. And what we're trying to do is what we're going to talk about here in today's episode is considerations for where you put your dispersion relative to this area, right? And then what adjustments do we need to make in terms of our aim to try to get the ball there?
Shot value, maximizing, for most of it, maximizing ball on the green, right? Like we want to be putting in a safe place.
Yes.
Right. And then as you get better, closer to the hole, it's essentially, that's kind of
pretty much. Yeah. And I would say number 1 is always, yeah. So if we start getting into like kind of the priority list, like the hierarchy, right? So like you've got this green, let's say you've got a penalty area left. Well, if you take a look at your dispersion, and we're going to talk about potentially how to visualize that dispersion, but avoiding the penalty area is going to be the number 1 priority. If that means that more of your dispersion is off the green, then so be it. You just need to accept that for the distance you are, for the size of this green, for the size of your dispersion, right? Some percentage of your shots are going to be off the green, right? Because you cannot prioritize getting it on the green or getting it close to the hole at the expense of putting your dispersion in a penalty area, because you might hit those couple shots close to the hole. You might get a couple more shots on the green, but the shots that end up in a penalty area are going to more than wash out the benefit that you get from getting a couple more balls on the green or a couple more balls close to the hole. So we have to flush out penalties first. Like those are full shot penalties, right? We've got to get those, because getting it versus off the green to on the green is not a full shot difference. To get it from 30 feet to 20 feet, that's not a full shot difference. Right? There's nothing that's making a full shot difference other than a penalty area. So we have to flush those out first as much as we possibly can, even for the tour player, right? Even for the elite of the elite.
No question. That's right? Where you hear on the broadcast, he's missing it in the right place. That's what
correct.
They say, right?
And that's where that's correct. And what people don't realize is that there's not they're not doing anything in their swing. Hopefully, like I was telling you, like I was doing as a kid, right? Hopefully, they're not doing anything in their swing, or they're not intentionally adjusting anything skill wise to try to like miss it. They're not trying to miss. They're trying to pursue the shot they're trying to pursue, but their avoidance is in the pre-shot, is in where they're placing their target, so that then they can allow that dispersion in their misses relative to the green to be in a good place. Even though they're technically not missing it, they're hitting it in their dispersion. They're missing it, quote unquote, uh, where they choose, right? And so that's the avoidance based strategy is pre-shot, right? Once you figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, that's very pursuit based in terms of what is that actual, what's that adjusted, what's that target, what's that distance that you're trying to send the golf ball.
So it goes back to Raymond Pryor, because I think that that's, like you said, it's like the foundation. It's like when you have nothing else, that foundational awareness of what we're talking about inside the brain, it's like almost like the ultimate skill that we have in golf. And when we start to put that into the factor of decision making in your approach shot, it makes tons of sense. We're accepting, I'm going to have a dispersion pattern. I'm accepting of that. I'm accepting, like I would love to say I'm going to hit every ball dead straight with a 7-iron, 172 yards, land, on a bullet. It's not going to happen, right? And so as we have acceptance, we can then pursue, a shot that allows us to take that into account. And then, like you said, avoid, at first you're flushing out penalties and disruptors, and then obviously trying to get in better places and closer to the hole as you get better. So, or as the shot dictates. And one of the things I was thinking a lot about as you were going through this, and I know we will touch on it, is that a lot of golfers are pretty keenly aware, especially as you get to level 2 and level 3 golfer, like front, middle, back yardage, right? And they have some sense of like, let's say it's 165 yards carry over water, 180 to the middle, 192 to the back edge, right? And a lot of times we have GPS, we have, whatever, we can shoot the front of the green with our laser, we shoot the flag, then we know we have a rough estimate of front, middle, and back. And then we know, when I hit a little thin with that club, is it going to carry? Let me take an extra one. Like, people are aware of this. There's no question people play golf like that, right?
Yeah.
So, but what we don't ever have any awareness of is the width. Like, where are we aiming right to left? Like, how do I know how wide that green is, right? Now, if you're playing in a tournament for the PGA, you're getting a little sheet that tells you how wide that green is. But in this case, standing out there looking at the green and saying, wow, there's water left. How wide is that? I'm kind of accepting of a dispersion pattern that's 27 right to left with my 7-iron from 172. But
correct.
How wide is that green? Where is 27 yards, And that we got to have a strategy for that too, don't we, Robbie?
We do. And there's some different ways to do it. The simpler, the better in most cases. Even for the best of the best, if you can make something incredibly simple for them that, again, it might not be optimal, it might not be perfect, but if it gets them in the ballpark, then it's going to be way better than them not aiming with dispersion at all. So what we're going to recommend is that you use your fingers and you hold up fingers to visualize a dispersion of your shots. And this is tricky. There's still not a perfect way of figuring out exactly what your dispersion should be. But I'm going to give you a starting off point, which would be about 4 out of 5 of your shots ending up within a boundary that you discover, right? So I don't always love using the range for this because the range is perfectly flat, sterile, no spacing variability challenge environment that you've heard us talk about ad nauseum. So your dispersion on the range is very likely going to be tighter than what you're going to get out on the golf course. So if you hold up your index finger and your little finger, kind of like a
hook'em horns.
Like think of a like hook'em horns, like Texas Longhorns, yep, or even like Wolfpack for my wife because she's an NC State grad. You can start to play around with the width between your index and your little finger here, and kind of aiming the middle of that dispersion, hitting shots and say, okay, am I getting 4 out of 5 in that zone? If the answer is no, okay, well, maybe do I get 4 out of 5 if I go thumb and little finger, right? Let's try again. If not, okay, do I have to go even wider to where I'm like literally like hang 10, like kind of like this, right? And so, with driver, is it like this? And then with irons, am I getting 5 out of 5? Okay, then maybe you need to shrink that a little bit for irons. And so once you have a general idea of what your dispersion could be, then it's a matter of going out on the golf course and starting to keep track a little bit of, hey, am I getting basically 4 out of 5 shots in my dispersion? And if the answer is no, then the first thing to do is not just blame your swing. Right? It's to start with, okay, was there anything about the environment here that I didn't take into account? Something like lie, right? The grass that the ball's sitting in, that can oftentimes change your distance intent if you're outside your dispersion because it came up long or short. Was there something about the slope? Was the ball below your feet or above your feet? Or are you hitting uphill or hitting downhill, right, that you didn't take into account, right? Or is there something about wind, right? Is the wind coming off the right? Is it coming off the left that you didn't take into account? Or did it just gust at the wrong time? And then that golf's hard, right? That's going to happen.
Right.
But you have to have an awareness, in my opinion. And this is where the feedback comes in, the feedback loop that you talked about in the last episode of always trying to close that feedback loop. You have to have an awareness of, okay, was that shot in my dispersion or not? Okay. The only feedback you give yourself can't be, oh, did that ball hit the green or not? Or am I close to the hole or not? Right? Because I can tell you there are a bunch of shots that a golfer is going to hit inside their dispersion that shouldn't go on the green, right? There's a bunch of shots a golfer's going to hit that are well inside their dispersion that are going to be nowhere close to the hole. And so if you go from taking the potential positive feedback you're giving yourself by saying, okay, that was just within my dispersion, to the negative feedback saying, oh, okay, that was a bad shot, quote unquote, bad shot, right? When we talk about some of the more Raymond Pryor stuff, right? We're making the feedback more pervasive, more permanent, more personal than it really is, as opposed to saying, okay, was it in or out, right? If I have my dispersion here, it was either in my dispersion or it was out of my dispersion. It wasn't a good or bad, right? It just is what it is, right? And then if it wasn't, okay, first thing is like, did I misread the shot? And then 2, all right, was my rhythm, right? Did I put a swing on it that I would expect to see my dispersion, right, relative to that, right? Because what we know is like when the rhythm changes, that's when we see the biggest changes in the dispersion. And then if the rhythm was good, okay, skill wise, like did it hit the heel or toe, high on the face, low on the face, right? Was the face open or closed? Or did I have too much speed or too little speed, right? And then it's just starting to give yourself very good feedback around every single shot, what's going on. But if you're not holding up fingers, if you don't know what your dispersion is, and if you're not making predictions on how you're moving it for lie, slope, and wind, then again, you're just giving yourself positive and negative feedback based off the outcome of the shot. And that's just not going to be sustainable progress long-term, in my opinion.
So an action step for, I was thinking about this the other day, an action step for the listener might be as a jumping off point, if nothing else.
Yep.
Taking these kind of 4 clubs, pitching wedge, 7-iron, some type of like long iron hybrid, higher lofted fairway wood, whatever you play in there, somewhere between a 5 hybrid, 4 hybrid, 7 wood, 5 wood, like in that range, 3-iron. And then driver, take it to the range and start to notice things, right? Hold your fingers up, look at where they're going. If you have access to a launch monitor that can measure this stuff, right? Because TrackMan and others actually measure it. So that's great. So you should be doing that if you have access to it. If you don't, then you should be doing it like Rob said with the fingers. If you already know your numbers on TrackMan or Foresight or whatever, try to see what it looks like with your fingers. Like test that out so you can get a visual on it, right? What does a 20-yard dispersion right to left with my pitch and wedge mean visually when I'm hitting it on the range, right? And so if I can have
Yep.
at least some jumping off points with a wedge, a mid iron, a longer club, and then my driver, that helps me like make the decision throughout the bag where I should try to be hitting these shots.
Definitely.
And all you're trying to do is bend this prediction. Like if you were going to play it, you said 4 out of 5 times. I think that's a good visual. You could say 100 times, right? So like, okay, if I did 80 out of 100, what would that look like? Like, what
Yeah.
is it looking like? And what am I going to do if I had to play out all 80 of those balls or, all 100 of those balls, play them out and
Mm-hmm.
get a total score? How would I do? And if I'm taking the water on the par 5, inside my dispersion with a 4 wood, I'm going to have double bogeys and I'm going to have an eagle here and there. What's going to be the balance of that, right?
Yeah.
I've watched Bernhard Langer at the Country Club of Virginia win that golf tournament a couple of times, always in the hunt there. And he plays the most conservative strategy around there. Doesn't go for the par 5 or what, never even thinks about it. There's a par 4 that's pretty drivable, but it's got a little creek in play. He hits 5 iron off the tee. Like it is never in his best interest to sort of bend that. And I think Bernhard probably is like the epitome of all that, right? And then he chips and putts really well, so that's helpful.
Yep.
But as we give you that picture, I think now the listener starts to understand. Okay. And then you started to mention where it goes to the next part, which is like this, the lie, slope, and wind adjustments. Because now, and I would say there's actually another adjustment to that from practice. Okay. And I know you just mentioned it, but whatever I'm doing in practice isn't going to really typically happen on the course. Okay.
Your dispersion is going to be bigger.
Yeah. Why is
This
that?
is going to, yeah.
Time, environment, pressure, whatever you want to call it, right? Rhythm, lack of rhythm, good rhythm, bad rhythm. Like, so you have to actually probably take that into account too, outside of lie, slope, wind, and how those adjustments go. And so I think a really good thing for us to do, Rob Fails, I'm throwing this at you live on the air, but we had discussed this before. Maybe that's a good bonus episode for our Substack is to go through lie, slope, wind. Just go through those and talk more in depth. Because if we go into in depth on all those on this episode, we could go on for a while. But I think those trying to read your lie, understand how the slope affects the ball flight, and then how the wind also affects the distance and the direction of the shot.
Yep.
These are all distance and direction considerations, but
yes,
I think we could go into some good detail. That'd be a good nerdy thing for the bonus episodes on the Substack. So we could pump that out in the next probably week and put it up there. So if you're interested in that, it'll be out there on the Substack. We are going to do that. We've been talking about doing that episode anyway, but that would be a good, I don't even know. It's probably not a gigantic episode, but that would be a nice one for the listener to take that a little bit more in depth. On this episode, generally speaking, lie, slope, wind, distance, and direction, you've got to make adjustments, right? To assume that that ball below my feet, this is what I was talking about. You and I were mentioning this before you came on. Like, it's cool to think you can hit a really good 4 wood, with a little bit of water out of bounds in play, par 5, I'm going to go for it in 2. Then the ball is a little bit below your feet. And I think that like, as you progress as a player, the person who tries to take that on is not the good player. It's the level 1 or level 2 player that doesn't have acceptance of the fact that that's going to be a huge adjustment. Right. And so they try to take it on where you or I would go, I can't hit that shot. Like, what am I doing? Right. I can hit the shot from here if it's level and there's no wind and so whatever. But I'm going to make that adjustment and say, I'm going to hit a different club here.
Correct.
Because that's going to be.
Correct. Yeah. There's a reason why we say it's 80% inside your dispersion, not 100. Because if you were to try to figure out where your fingers would be to get 100% of your golf balls inside your dispersion, I mean, even your level 3 golfers, I mean, you're going to need two hands. I mean, I'm serious. Like,
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
if we tried to completely eliminate penalty areas, then our strategy would be too conservative. We're not going to be able to drive as many greens and reg as we need. We're not going to get the ball as close to the hole proximity wise as we're going to need. So the answer isn't to just completely eliminate penalty areas. And we want to make that clear. Is like when you're figuring out what your dispersion is, again, it's 70 to 80% inside of your fingers. That way, when you go out and play, you know, okay, I do not want this dispersion here touching a penalty area. Understanding that that does not mean that you should never hit in that penalty area. You should hit in that penalty area some percentage of the time, 20% of the time. You should hit in that penalty area. Understanding that, okay, that's because of where you're putting your dispersion, you're as aggressive as you can possibly be, right, to be able to drive your greens and reg, your proximity on those 80% of shots. So that's the acceptance of it is understanding, okay, like we never want to be taking more than a penalty rate than what we need. So that's why we say this dispersion. We never want to be touching the penalty area with that dispersion. And then second priority would then be, okay, if I can get my entire width, again, my viewers here are seeing the two fingers here, but you can visualize holding your arm out, fairly straight arm, not a whole lot of bend. But you know, if you got longer arms, you might need to bend a little bit. That's fine. If you got smaller hands too, you might need to split your fingers out a little bit too. But again, this is something that you're discovering on the range, trying to figure out where your 4 out of 5 is. But if I can get my entire dispersion outside of a penalty area, then I'm trying to say, okay, can I get more of my dispersion on the green? Right? And then only at that point, if I got my entire dispersion on the green, then I can try and get closer to the hole. And honestly, when I do this a lot, it doesn't really happen much outside of about 130 yards, pretty much. Like if I'm inside 130, there's quite a few times where I'm getting my whole dispersion on the green, and then I can start sliding it pretty close to pretty much being on the hole. But I'm telling you, like outside of 130, 140, I mean, it's almost, I can't tell you the last time I've been able to get my entire dispersion on the green and then move it. Like it must be a really big green or, you know, or something like that, right? To where I can do that. And what's interesting is that if you look at strokes gained a lot of times on tour, I think 130 is actually like the 50-50 to get it inside 20 feet on tour, which is basically like, again, that's our birdie opportunities. So like we talk about blackjacks and putting as being like the 50-50, right? Which is basically 8 feet on tour is their 50-50 make percentage. Well, if you extrapolate that back to approach play, their 50-50 make percentage to get inside 20 feet is basically 130 yards in the fairway. And it's like 60 yards are in the rough, 60 or 70 yards in the rough. Yep.
So I remember, I think it was Zach Johnson saying that he never aimed at he would say, I never really aim at the flag unless I've got 9 iron or shorter. It's kind of like this is 15 years ago plus. So like this is before a lot of this data analytics came into play. So, but it's again, the instincts were right. Like, okay, I know I can control it
pretty
that well.
Spot on.
And Zach Johnson could hit an iron shot. You know, boy could hit it straight.
Oh yeah.
So wait, so Zach Johnson doesn't aim 7 irons right at the flag? Are you serious? No, he does not. to your point. And that's again, so now we've gone through like, it's not aim at the flag every time. It's not aim at the middle of the green every time. Because again, middle of the green, if you aim at the middle of the green, I think we've given you a good illustration that a lot of times that's aiming you into trouble. It could be aiming you into trouble. Or you may be able to hit it closer more often by not aiming in the middle of the green, depending on the hole and the situation. And that's not even counting the adjustments we're making on the shot, distance and direction.
Correct.
So let's go through I think that was a good picture. I think a good picture of what we're talking about here. How do we bend the probability in our favor so that we can shoot the best score if we were playing that hole over and over and over again? So
Yep.
let's go to level one. Let's go work through it. Level one player considerations, major considerations for level one, level two, level three.
Yes.
So as we start at level one player, I think it's clear. It's clear to understand that for the most part, making generalizations, that level one player is going to have the widest dispersion, both long to short and right to left.
Yeah.
However, you may there are some nuance to this, which we'll talk about in a second, because you actually can be a very accurate level one player shooting, okay, but just not hit the ball very far or very high, and so
Correct.
that becomes a
Exactly.
consideration, And this is something. This is one of the things. Like, I'm on a soapbox on this thing. I've been on it for 10 years. I'm just going to mention this as a passing thought. So I was playing in at a pro member a few weeks ago, and I was playing with this couple, and they're a great couple, very avid golfers, play all the time. And so I've been at the country club now, and I'm into my 18th season. So I was playing with a husband and wife. I'm going to guess they're in their 70s. So the lady is playing the red tee. Eric, from the, I don't always get to the par fours and two anymore. And, yeah. I mean, that's part of, that's part of golf, as we get into our 70s, hit the ball shorter, da-da-da. And I said, you know what the unfair part is? Your husband, when I started here 18 years ago, I played golf with him. He was playing the blue tees with me. Okay. Then he went from the blue tees to the green tees. And then we went from the green tees to the white tees. And then he went from the white tees to the gold tees, which, by the way, are on the same tee box on almost every hole as you, which are still playing the red tees all this time later. Doesn't seem like that makes a lot of sense for the ladies, in my opinion. So my point is we need what I would call a senior ladies tee box, right? So that's something that's in front. For a lot of the there's a lot of folks as you get in, they don't carry their driver much past 100 yards in the air. They need a tee box that they can play. So that's kind of a consideration of a level one player, which a lot of those players used to be level two or level three players, but just over time just don't hit the ball as far, right? So now they're playing that ball more along the ground. So level one player, approach shot strategy, major considerations. What do you see out of your level one golfers? I guess there is a wide range there of what they look like, but what do you think are the major considerations there for level one, Rob?
Yeah, and again, it's just in the context of that first part, right? Well, so where are we putting the dispersion? I would say for a lot of these level one golfers, you're going to need to lump bunkers into that almost full shot penalty area zone.
Yeah.
Just in my experience. So again, that when you think about trying to take bunkers out, then you start to have to be pretty creative about what you're doing, because especially with these shots that we're hitting, that a lot of times like land angle gets really flat. Like we don't have some of the times we don't have a ton of speed, and then it gets getting out of the bunkers that much more difficult. We're talking about laying up short of bunkers on par fours, right? Because that's the only thing we can really do, right? If we try to drive this thing, try to push it up onto the green, too many of our shots, too much of our dispersion is going to be in that bunker, which for them might as well be a full shot penalty, right? So you got to treat those bunkers sometimes as full shot penalties, and understand that a lot of times we got to be creative, laying up short, aiming like completely, like none of your dispersion even touching the green sometimes, right? Like that's okay. That's going to happen. Like there are going to be approach shots as a level one golfer where your entire dispersion doesn't even touch the green, and that's okay. Especially, if our bunker play is a full shot penalty, that's going to happen from time to time.
Yeah. So if you're trying to, and I think the interesting thing about level one is you're trying to improve and learn the game a lot of times. I think there's two.
Yep.
There's two visuals on level one, like we were just talking about. You're someone who's trying to learn the game, or you're a casual golfer with plenty of speed and whatever, but just haven't gotten to the point where you're controlling the ball as well. And then you've got the shorter hitter that's just not quite keeping up and being able to hit it onto the, not able to get into greens in regulation with a club that can stop the ball on the green, right? I'm rolling the ball up there, to your point. So you got kind
Correct.
of two pictures there. And I think that there are times where that self-awareness comes into play where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. Like I'm just going to play the best I can and
Mm-hmm.
see what I do. But if you're really trying to shoot a score, like I think that shorter hitter that's still playing that senior tee box, they tend to be the ones that are strategizing around the bunkers and stuff like that because they're out there
Correct.
playing. They're still playing a game. They're competitive with their friends who are probably playing the same game as
Yes.
them. And so they're out there doing that. And so I have a guy I teach who's just phenomenal. I mean, almost 88 years old, playing really good golf. But there are holes, par fours, where he's aiming, like he's aiming left of the green and he's a good bunker
Mm-hmm.
player, but that front bunker is so deep. He doesn't even
Yeah.
want to go in there anyway, climb in and climb out. So he's going to aim left of the green because it's an easy chip from over there. Or there's a certain hole. I'm going to aim right of the hole because the chip is easier coming back. And so they've gained this awareness of that, right? So they're aiming to a place where they know their short game shot comes into play a little bit easier. One
Yes.
of the things I like to do with my
Yeah.
students too, if they want to gain a better understanding of that, is go out and play and force yourself to miss all 18 greens in regulation. Just go out there and play. This is obviously not playing a big money game doing this or something you,
Right.
or play 9 holes or play 6 holes or whatever, just as an example. Go out and miss the green every time. Say, I cannot have a birdie putt and see how I do.
Yeah.
It's not a short game thing. It's a strategy thing from the fairway. It's an approach shot strategy thing.
Yep.
Like if I'm not on
Totally.
the green, where do I want to be? And that starts to give you this idea about where I am aiming to have my best percentage and making a good score. On the green for a birdie, off the green, this is the easiest chip. Kind of play on from there. Your
Totally.
your level one player who's the casual golfer learning golf, hits the ball with some speed. Their major considerations is much about contact and just controlling this ball flight. So it's like that.
Totally.
Am I making contact? Can I control the ball flight?
Right. And that's the other thing that I would say too is like understand too as a level one golfer is like for the size of your dispersion, there are going to be holes where you can't get the entire dispersion out of a penalty area. Just can't do it. Like right to
No,
left, it's
not
going to be too
can't do
big.
it. Right. So you're just trying to play the percentages still. Try to
Right.
bend it to your
You're just trying to
favor.
develop your skill. That's where the acceptance comes in and saying, hey, I'm going to have shots out here where just contact wise, I just create a disruptor. Right. But that's my goal is to try to reduce the number of these disruptors as much as possible through what I'm doing in my training and my skill development. So that would be where a lot of the skill and the awareness would start to come in for a level one golfer is like, that's the best strategy for them is just
Yeah.
reduce their skill dispersion.
If I'm a 36 handicapper that hits a 4 hybrid or a 5 wood from 150 yards, okay, carry. Where
Yeah.
would I aim on 17 at Sawgrass? What is the answer? Who knows? But I mean, it's going to
Yeah.
be in the water most of the time. Like you are most of the time
Yeah.
going to hit that ball in the water.
Yep.
Our number 2 hole on Tuckahoe Creek currently goes over water on the second shot. And it's about from the edge of the water to carries like 90 yards, 80, 90 yards, something like that. So to carry the bank, and then
Yeah.
you're obviously not going to be right up against the water. Like it's a long carry. And, for that player, I'm like, hey, man, how many times out of 10 are you hitting, or to your point, how many times out of 5 am I hitting that short? I just miss it and hit it short. Even if it's a little thin. Oh, it's 2 or 3. Okay. If it's 2 or 3,
Yeah.
you got to hit it over the back of the green. You've got to get up and hit it over the back of the
Correct.
green. Right? And when you hit it thin,
Yes.
2 or 3 out of 5, guess where it is? It's on the green. Okay.
It's great.
It carries. It's on the green.
Fantastic. Yep.
And the other ones that you flush and you're in the back bunker or you're over the back, you're not in the penalty area. So you've got to avoid those at all
Yes.
costs if you're going to play your best bet. So that gives you that
Correct.
picture of if you got water left and water short, which we have a couple par threes, one on the creek, one on the river.
Mm-hmm.
The one on the
Yep.
creek plays long. I mean, it can be 100. I played it the other day. It was 170, 174, I think, from the tee I was playing.
Is that the one on the front?
So it's 14.
Is that like 7? Oh,
14.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
right. That's
14.
right.
So it's kind of like not quite an island green. It's like a peninsula green, essentially.
Yeah,
And
I
it's a
remember.
big green though, big green, huge green. But you've got to mind that front to back and right to left in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the miss to the right isn't really any good because it's off the it's in the junk. Like it's not in the water, but it's in the
Yep,
junk. So you got to favor the right side if you have that wide dispersion. So level
totally.
one, those are your considerations. You're shooting your best score. Understand, realize you do have a shot pattern too. Work through, try to figure out what it is. What are your go-to shots? The biggest thing I would say is when you get probably in that lie and slope situation, not necessarily win, but lie and slope,
Yeah.
the shots get difficult for you to hit, kind of punt, right? Like play an easier shot, almost no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. I hate to say that, but you just got to make good contact. And like we'll discuss in our bonus episode, the lie in the rough or the grass and then the slope
Yeah.
can make shots very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so you gotta kind of punt around those a little bit, in my opinion. Don't be hitting 3-wood out of the rough all day. Don't do that.
Yes.
That is not going to be your best bet.
Nope.
Anything you want to add on level one golfer there? You want to move on to level
I'm
two?
sure I'll think of something, but
We can always go back. See,
I'm
that's the
feeling
beauty
good
of
about
this.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Level,
Yep.
level,
It's our
level.
podcast.
Yeah, we can, and the magic of editing, the magic of it all. Level two golfer. This is the sweet spot of the person that listens to this podcast, right? You mentioned
Yep.
Scott Fawcett before, and I said, I think he's had a big effect on golf, but kind of especially for level three golfers and tour players. Like he's that.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to offer up here maybe helps that level one and level two player have a little bit better picture of it as well.
Yeah.
So as you get into this level two golfer, now I'm shooting in the 80s. I'm an 80s shooter. I'm a high 80s, low 80s, high 70s, down to mid 70s kind of shooter.
Yeah.
In a little different framing of the question, when you take that player on the course for a playing lesson,
Yeah.
what do you notice, generally speaking, about the weaknesses
Yeah.
in that strategy that you see with that player that you go, man, if they did this better, they
Totally.
might be a level three golfer tomorrow.
Yeah. I would say that aside from off the tee, hitting it further, reducing penalties off the tee, like putting that aside, because this is the approach shot episode. I think appreciating how big their front to back dispersion actually is and where the center of that dispersion is. I think
So
for them is a
that
big,
again. I know
big
you
key.
did. I know you did before, but describe that again for like what's the
So for practical
there?
example, I see a load of like level two golfers who are aiming like to carry the ball, and they're basically the best shot they've ever hit. Like their top 5% of all shots that they're going to hit.
And this is men,
right?
mostly.
And then
I hate to make generalizations.
yeah,
But.
totally. And like when you put them on TrackMan, and you don't want to be the bearer of bad news to them, but
so basically,
when you put
what
them
you're
on
saying is
TrackMan
you
and
have
you
no
show
idea
them, like,
how far you hit the ball. That's
correct.
Yeah.
Like when you show them how what their average carry distance, because oftentimes they're looking at total and then they're looking at the best, like the highest total, right? When you show them what their actual average carry number is, they'll look at you like you've got 2 or 3 heads. But then you tell them like, hey, like how many times do you actually miss a green long throughout a round of golf? And they'll think about it and they're like, when I don't skull it? And I'm like, yeah, when you don't skull it. How often do you
like a good
miss the
shot.
green long? Right. And I'll be like, never.
Well, I make this point.
Can't think of the last time.
Here's it. How far do you hit your 7-iron? 160. I mean, it's like, okay. So if you actually are carrying it you're hitting it 142. I mean, 145. We're watching it. You're giving a lesson. I do this. They're warming up, hitting 7-irons. I say, how far do you play that on the course? 160. 7-irons my 160. 7-irons my 150.
Mm-hmm.
And they're carrying it 145, carrying it 142, 138.
Yep.
And I think the reason why we don't always realize that is because when we mishit it, it's not going on the green. So we're just like, as soon as
Right.
we miss it, we don't think about it anymore, right? So that's, I missed it. When I hit it well, it'll be on the front of the green, like it might even bounce for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so then all of a sudden, or I'm on the rough, I catch a little flyer and it goes right, it
Yep.
rolls more, or it flies more. And so if it's 160 to the middle, and I carry it 148 and it rolls to 152, and I've got a 24 footer straight up the hill for birdie, I'm just happy it happened. And I'm not thinking about the fact that
Correct.
I could have hit 6-iron and been right beside the hole. Like I'm on
Yes.
the green.
Correct.
So it made
Correct.
sense, right? And then we
That's a
just,
great point. Yep.
so that's what I mean, to your point, that's exactly what I see.
Yeah,
You
and then it
said it
makes
in
them
such a
feel
nice
good.
way. You said they
Yeah,
don't know
no,
their
like
front dispersion. I said they're lying to themselves about how far they hit the ball.
they are. Yes. Correct. Yeah. So that would be number one. And then the second big thing I see for level 2 golfers is dramatically undervaluing the effect of lie, slope, and wind when it comes to distance. All three. Like the difference between being into the grain and down grain, when you show them the actual difference in the ball speed, like I've had golfers come and say, "Hey, I'm chunking it out of the rough," and I go watch them hit shots out of the rough. They're not chunking it, right? They're just hitting shots that are into grain. Like we'll put one that'll like happen to be into the grain, and then they'll hit it fine, and the ball will come up 40 yards short of their intent. I'll say, "See, look, I chunked." Like, nope, that was into the grain. That you did everything normal there. Like there was nothing out of the ordinary there. You just didn't understand how that lie was going to influence the golf ball. And then understanding too the volatility of how much the carry distance can change with small variances in the lie. Like the difference between a flyer and one that comes out kind of like normal, it's so difficult to read that correctly. And that's what makes hitting in the rough harder. Like that's why the rough is a penalty, because of the unpredictability of it. It really is tricky. It's a skill to learn to read the differences in a flyer lie versus one that just kind of comes out kind of dead, like high on the face, kind of dead, right? So I would say that would be, and then wind, like, again, we're going to talk about this on our bonus episode, but dramatically undervaluing wind, dramatically undervaluing how much it gets hit side to side as well as front to back, as well as slope considerations as well. Just basically underplaying everything. Like basically taking the rangefinder, lasering the pin, and then picking the club that probably their best 10% of shots are going to carry about 5-6 yards short of that distance, right? Is what I see a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly right. So, and then I think, yeah, so lie, slope, wind, and then am I even playing the right shot? Like, do I understand how that's going to affect where the ball goes?
As a level 2 golfer, are you trying to hit draws and fades? Like, stop it.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the Scott Fawcett thing. Like, and he's dogmatic about it, and I think that it is what it is. But play one shot all the time, and I whatever. I think people are different. That's the way I look at it. Some people play more shots, but in this level of player, just try to hit it good. That's the end of the story, right? So just try to hit it better.
Yep. Correct.
We'll figure out where it goes later. But
yes,
yeah. So that's probably the major consideration. So then, am I aiming? Do I understand my dispersion? Do I understand how wind, slope, lie affect where the ball would go anyway, and make those adjustments to my aim? And then how does that factor into basically the architecture of the hole and where I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do? And I think that this takes us to level 3, because I think that it's pretty clear to see when you get to scratch golfer. Like the scratch golfer is the guy in the group that, like, when you're playing with a foursome and they're like, hey, no, don't hit that club, hit this one, don't hit that shot, hit this. Like, they've got it figured out. Like that's how they have to make. Now it gets better with tour player. Tour player is even another level. But point being, when you've gotten down to scratch golfer, you've got a lot of this figured out, and you can coach other people up on it, right? Yeah. So we know they're already good at this. Then what is it? What are the major considerations for them to even get better? Like, what is that next level
Yeah.
look like for them? And I think that for me, when I'm watching a scratch player, that hey, Eric, I'm playing well, but I want to win the club championship this year versus finish third. You know, a lot of that isn't swing skill. A lot of that is,
Yeah.
some of this stuff really, or putting, or a shot here or there.
Yeah.
So, what do you think it is for them that they probably do really well, and then also
Yeah.
what just that next
I
little bit of
mean,
level that can be unbelievable?
so to avoid kind of the repetition of just continuing to do everything better, like reading the lie better, reading slope better, reading wind better, understanding that their dispersion is tighter, and that's something that can be tricky. Is like they spent a lot of time in level 2 to get there, which a lot of times in level 2, because your dispersion is kind of this, right? You're going to be, sorry, when I say this, is like pretty wide in our thumb, sorry, pretty wide with our index and little finger. Um, your targets, honestly, probably outside of 100 are going to be so like middle of the greenish, as provide there's not a penalty area right next to it. That when their dispersion goes tighter, then it's tricky for them to then say, okay, and now I need to hit more towards flags. So understanding that it's okay, like this golfer's got a smaller dispersion, they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit closer to the pin. That is going to happen as a result of a tighter dispersion. So understanding that. And then number 2 is like thinking about a level 3 golfer that's spending a lot of time in level 3 trying to get better. I think they're blessed with skill, and I think a lot of times their skill is a curse as well, right? So having that acceptance of, hey, this is your target, right? This doesn't mean that you're going to start the ball here and then work it towards the flag, or start the ball here and work it towards the flag on the other way, right? Because as soon as you start it here and try to work it towards the flag, now guess what you're changing? You're changing your target, right? So pick that smart target and then work it, so you can start it wherever you want to get the ball to land on the center of that dispersion. So I think there's a commitment piece to that. A lot of times for a level 3 golfer, they'll be aiming away from a flag they think they should be aiming to. And then a lot of times they'll be aiming at a flag that they feel like they shouldn't be. I don't know if I said that correctly, but you get the picture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think there's that commitment piece of that. Okay, I've done what I need to do. The work is done. I'm going to make my adjustments for lie, slope, wind, and then I'm going to see what happens. As opposed to when you're standing over it, then thinking like, oh man, but I really want to hit this thing in there tight. So I've picked my target, I've made my adjustments, but then mid downswing, I'm just going to give it a little bit of that, draw face to path feel, just to try to sneak it over that flag a little bit. Like that's the kind of stuff we got to flush out as much as possible, because all you're doing in that sense is just undermining your processes and you're making your dispersion bigger.
Yeah.
So trying to really stay disciplined to the work that you've put in, I think a lot of times for level 3 golfers, where some of the opportunity lies.
Yeah, and I think that level 3 golfer can play fabulous golf like that. Just consistent, committed, really good targets, really good understanding of the adjustments, good contact, controlling their emotions well, controlling their rhythm of their swing well. And what you see, I think if they were looking to, like, that person could be a +4 handicap doing that, like really, really, really well.
Yep.
As opposed to a tour player, a +4 handicap can't sniff a tour player. And
Right.
what you see there, which is super interesting, is that really, really good level 3 player, exceptional level 3 player, the best you've seen at your country club, basically.
Yeah.
They still have what I call a country club short game most of the time. And that does play into this, right? Where the short game is good. It's good. It's fine. But it's basic. Okay. And tour players are very keenly aware of how often they need to hit it close to the hole to be able to compete. and they are willing to take on a little bit more risk, a little bit more edges of the green shots. Because again, a lot of times they're putting these flags on the tour pretty close, right, to the edges of the green. They're, most of them, making generalizations, unafraid to miss it on the short side, depending on what that is most of the time, because their short games are exceptional. So they are willing to take, and that's probably the biggest difference. Like, the short game is exceptional, and so it affords them to be probably slightly more aggressive on the approach shot, even inside that dispersion, which is a little better too, because they know they can still get the ball up and down a good amount of the time.
Right.
And so that's like to your point. I think that's the point you were making before, is like knowing, hey, I've gotten here with safety, but at some point, if I'm going to push it, I gotta get 7.5 birdie in positions around. I gotta get, like, I can't hit it to 25 feet and 2-putt all day long. I mean, in the U.S. Open, yes, but a normal event, like, I can't do that because I'm not going to compete. I'm not going to make the cut that way. Like, I've got to shoot better score. I got to give myself better chances. And that's where the data comes into play. That's where that proximity comes into play that we're learning and understanding. And I think you see it. I mean, I'll see it in a couple of weeks at the tournament. We host a Champions Tour playoff event, Charles Schwab Cup. So tournament week starts in a few days. Actually, this Sunday, we shut it down and flip it over to tour event. So that's just 5 days away. And, then I get to be range ops for the week. That's my role. So it's a fun week for me, for sure.
That'll
Long
be cool.
week, but fun week. So any other thoughts on level 3 golfer, Rob?
Again, as soon as we click stop on this, a couple things will come to mind. But no, I think we hit. I think this just the big thing is have a plan. Think about how you're going to figure out what your dispersion is. Understand that general hierarchy, which doesn't honestly really change when you go from level 1 all the way to tour player. It's just your dispersion gets so much tighter that then you start being able to take on more risk. Is penalty disruptor avoidance, as many of these as we can get on the green as possible, and then as close to the hole as we can get it, right? In that order. I'm never gonna prioritize getting closer to the hole if that means I'm gonna get fewer balls on the green, right? I'm never gonna prioritize just getting it on the green if that means I'm gonna get more penalties and disruptors, right? So understand that there is this hierarchy that we're gonna work through, right? And that's going to inform where you place your dispersion. From there, right, then we have to make our adjustments for how's the lie going to adjust the distance, how's the slope going to adjust the distance, how's the wind going to adjust the distance. Then you're going to pick your club. And once you've got your club selection, then it's like, okay, how's the slope going to influence the direction? How's the wind going to influence the direction, right? And that's going to give you your intended aim relative to your target, relative to the center of your dispersion, right? You might be aiming outside your dispersion, right, to account for wind and slope. Understand that. You don't have to be aiming at the center of your dispersion. Almost never. Just think about like a straight putt, right? You're not going to get very many straight putts, right? Oftentimes, you're not going to be aiming at the center of your dispersion. That's okay, right? That's because very rarely do you get a perfectly flat lie with no crosswind. Right. That's why that's the case. So then you're going to walk in, you're going to align relative to your aim, and you're going to swing and you're going to see what happens. Right. That's the process that we like to encourage our golfers to use. It's our preferences, but you're listening to the podcast because you want to know what our preferences are. So there you have it.
And then you're going to notice what happened. Right. And then you're going to look for patterns in what happened. And we talked about that, I think, on the tee shot episode. And it's just, you're not trying to fix or correct every swing. We're not going to go deep into this, but we're just reiterating, this is, and I think that because we're fans of the elite player, right? We watch on TV, and it used to kind of annoy me a little bit when I'd watch and I'd see them hit a shot and then they just look bewildered all the time. If they hit all of them at times, like looking around, looking at the trees, looking at the ground, looking at their club, like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that in my mind back then, I'm talking a long time ago, I would think, oh, well, they're just blaming something else for their bad shot. Like they're looking for an excuse as to why they mishit that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's not what they're doing at all. They're just being very
Right.
aware of what happened. Again, what they're doing is closing the feedback loop. They're going,
Yes.
oh, you know
Correct.
what? Here's that slow, Jim Furyk does this. Like he hits a shot and then he kind of like looks around and then he swings again. Do you ever notice that? Like he does it all the time.
Yes.
Like he just takes another swing. And then he hands his club to Fluff and they walk off. I'm like, why does Jim Furyk do that? It didn't annoy me with Jim Furyk, big fan. But like the point is he's closing his feedback loop. He's so aware of those little micro adjustments, slope, wind, what the ball was sitting on the grass. Was there dirt on the ball? Was he, and then he's going to hit his shot and he's going to try to understand what happened there. Like, what was it that just happened? And that closes the feedback loop. And then he's going to have, and these guys hit balls after the round because they notice things through the round. Then they come back after the round and they hit balls to try to figure out, oh, what was it that was going on today? And so,
and a lot of times they end up just doing skill training. They don't call it skill training. They don't know they're doing it, but that's pretty much what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, I couldn't close the face today. All right, let's go to the range. And I mean, was it Ben Hogan said that? Like, if he noticed he was fading it, he'd go to the range and hit a few hooks.
Just wanted to see it do something else.
It's like literally skill training.
Yeah, for sure.
What he was doing.
Yeah, and so I think that they probably sleep better that way. Because you got to go play again tomorrow for the most important round of your life every time. So the point being, you as a golfer should notice. You should make adjustments on every shot, but you should start to detect patterns. The better you are as you move through level 1, 2, and 3, you should see. You should understand those patterns more because the patterns are going to be more diverse as you shoot higher scores. You're going to have a bigger range of outcomes. And as you get better, you're going to have to notice because you want to keep getting better. And those adjustments tend to be minute. That's the point we were just talking about there. So, I think that was a great summary, Rob Fales. And the action steps you gave them the action steps. Try to make an assessment of what you do with the dispersion. Use your fingers. Like I said, even if you just try to do 4 clubs next time you're at the range, get a sense of what's going on there. Tune into our episode that it's not going to be out when you listen to this, but shortly thereafter, we talk about the adjustments we make, live slope wind. That'll be fabulous. And then just understand who you are and what you do, and then notice what it is to close your feedback loop and understand what it is you need to learn from and how you're going to get better the next time. And that's all we ever try to do in this game of golf. We just want to get a little bit better. Don't you? Rob's favorite saying. I'm going to say Robbie's favorite saying. You ready for this? 1% better every day. 1% better every day.
Is that my favorite?
No, I can imagine you hearing someone say that and you're going like, what does that even mean? What does that mean? What do you mean 1%? How do you quantify 1% better? How do you do that?
If I got 2% better,
that'd be double.
That'd be way better.
Let's go 20%.
Why do I only have to get 1%? Can I get 3? Can I get 4?
Are we limiting ourselves by trying to get 1% better? We could maybe get 40%.
That's my least favorite saying, Eric. That's my least favorite.
I knew you'd hate that saying. We never discussed it, but I knew it. So that's why I said that. I know you well enough.
No, it's all good. It's fine.
And we try to get 1% better every day with our podcasts. And at least we got one out. We had a few technical difficulties tonight. So thank you, Rob, for bearing with me. I don't know what's going on.
We've got to be over the hump now. This has got to be the last technical issue we have for the rest of our podcasting lives.
Yes, and we are planning on pumping these out just like we were doing before. We're actually getting into a little bit of the slow part of the year. We'll slow her down in the next 6 weeks. We'll be into our slower season. We'll have some fun stuff going on then. I think so. So happy birthday, Rob Fales. I hope, did you have some cake?
Thank you, sir.
Did you have some cake? Was there cake?
Oh, yeah. We had some cheesecake. Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Well, the big 3-0. Yep. What a day. What a day.
What a day is right.
All right, buddy. Thank you. And we'll catch you next time on the Golf Intervention Podcast. Peace.
Cheers.